Hey there. Quantum Health Boss coming to you live from Toronto, Ontario, Canada. Yeah, I just had to come on live and do this show. Yeah, because we want to learn a little bit more about the World Economic Forum and how it's affecting our health and our wallets. I think it's very important that we talk about this topic right now because I'm in Canada and we're about to go to the polls probably right now. Early voting has just started. But if you're still on the fence about who you should pick, well, I'm here to educate you a little bit about this subject. The reason why I have to bring this to you is because there's a clear choice that you need to make when it comes to your health and your wallet in this election, right? So let me see what I got here. So today's Good Friday, and it's all about the Bible. But here, if you read Revelation, you know anything about the mark of the beast? Well, the mark of the beast is basically where at some point in time, you're going to have a mark. Hopefully, not you, but people will have a mark on their hand or their forehead. And basically, it's going to be hard to buy and sell if you don't have that mark, right? There's a lot of uh, controversial policies that are coming down from the World Economic Forum that are kind of leaning towards this mark of the beast. And one of the candidates um, that are vying for prime minister is Mark Carney. You know, is it the mark of the beast? So let's get into what the World Economic Forum is all about. So, World Economic Forum and its controversial policies, there's about 20 of them, globalist policies, paving the way for the mark of the beast. Let me try to fix this. So you can see me a little bit better. Nope. Oh, I'm gonna have to work on this next time. But yeah. So let's continue. So climate-based taxation. So the World Economic Forum wants carbon taxes, climate levies that disproportionately burden everyday citizens while allowing corporations to buy credits. This is one thing that is still happening today in Canada. And the only way to get rid of it is that you need a majority government in order to repeal the law. It's in law, and it went up right up to the Supreme Court because Saskatchewan took the government to court. The next is they want 15-minute cities, urban design, limiting travel, with neighborhoods framed as sustainable, but feared to be enable surveillance and control. They want you to eat bugs, eat ZE bugs, promoting insect protein and sustainable alternatives to meat criticized as degrading food quality and choice. Digital ID systems. Government issued digital identified tied to services, seen as some of the step towards loss of privacy and autonomy. Net zero home mandates, restrictions on traditional heating, gas stoves, and home design, pushing costly alternatives. Health passports, vaccine mandates. I think we've all seen this before, and it hasn't gone away. Global health ID requirements for travel or work triggered massive protests worldwide. Can't wait to the next one. Vehicle emissions bans, phasing out gas powered cars, forcing electric adoption regardless of infrastructure readiness. So basically, um, especially here in Canada, they've been pushing uh, electric vehicles to the point where they said 2035, no more gas powered vehicles. Ironically, they promoted people to buy Teslas and bring manufacturing here to Canada. But the only thing that's happened is they stopped driving their Teslas. They started blowing them up and doing things to the dealerships. And there's even a few cities right now that have Teslas and they're not driving them and they're up for sale and they're willing to take a loss. But if you do your research, all of the companies that they've either give subsidies to or gave back rebates to customers, they basically have not got their ROI, their investment. How? Well, Tesla, they've already given out $115 million dollars for rebates to people, and now they're basically telling them to not buy them and not drive them. And there's still another almost 50 million um, since the beginning of January that they have yet to approve that people are entitled to a rebate of $5,000 each. Also, they spent at least $1 billion in subsidies to car manufacturers to build parts, batteries, and cars right here in Canada. I don't know if you heard about GM. GM was building the bright electric vehicle right here in Canada. And number one, it's not 100% made in Canada. Number two, they stopped making them. Why? Because of demand. Demand has slowed. Nobody wants them. The WEF wants to seize your farmland, proposing to buy it out or limit farming to meet climate change targets. So they want to control climate change, but how are you going to eat? I guess they want you to eat those bugs. Yummy. Meat tax or meat bans. Taxes or limits on red meat consumption to reduce methane emissions. I think they love Good Friday because you're not supposed to be eating red meat, but I'm pretty sure a lot of people are still eating it. Social credit systems. China style behavior scoring based on individual actions. So basically, when AI and robots and you can't work, you can't farm, you can't do anything, basically, it's going to be a credit system. You're not going to have any money anymore. ESG investing rules, enforcing environmental, social, and governance goals. Yikes. Energy rationing. They want to limit power use or enforcing quotas. So, meaning rotating blackouts, not using coal for energy. What else? Maybe cutting off the hydroelectric dam. So, you have geoengineering, manipulating weather and blocking the sunlight, right? So, they want to manipulate the weather. So, basically, you can't grow the things that you need. I don't know if you know, but they have capabilities of making it rain. There's actually a company in the US that will do cloud seeding. There's one process that actually is not that great holistically. And then there's another process that they guarantee there's no chemicals, it's ready to go, it's really good. I'm not too sure about either one, but if the second option is really good, why aren't they using some of the trillions of dollars that they made from this controversial economic policies to start making it rain in Africa and places where they're saying that they're trying to help people? They want to save the climate for these people, but they won't even help the rain come there. Doesn't make much sense to me. Does it to you? Equity-based land redistribution. So you got land, you're going to work hard. Guess what they're trying to do? They're trying to take away your land and give it to race or equity or something like that. So population control narratives promoting reduced birth rates and access to fertility interventions under the guise of sustainability. So basically, that COVID thing that just came through. Well, I'm pretty sure it's affecting birth rates and fertility, and I'm pretty sure there's going to be some more things coming down the pipeline. Pandemic treaty, a binding agreement giving the World Health Organization power to declare global health emergencies. We all know about that one. The next one's coming soon. AI governance and thought policing. So basically, they want to censor people like me and you. They don't want the truth to come out. It's just like with the coronavirus and COVID-19, right? They were saying that, whoa, maybe these guys are spreading misinformation. But if you're only getting science from one side, you're basically shutting people up because you don't want the truth to come out. And the truth has come out that people are dying, people are sick, and people probably didn't need the vaccine. So AI governance. Did I miss that? Oh yeah, I just said that. But basically, when the AI governance too is they're trying to control AI like ChatGPT, so it doesn't give you the proper responses. It only gives you the woke left responses. So central bank digital currencies, programmable money that can be tracked or frozen. Critics warn it can limit freedom to buy and sell. Well, here in Canada, it already happened during the trucker convoy when people are protesting to being vaccinated for no reason. They shut down people's bank accounts and they're ready to do it again. A mom, she donated $5 and they shut down her bank account. She couldn't even buy food for her kids. Like, come on. So, Mark Carney, Prime Minister of Canada right now in an election, trying to be reelected, right? Actually, tried to be elected because he wasn't elected in the first place. He paid $300,000 to join the Liberal Party, and they got rid of everybody in the field so he can win. But did you know he's the former Board of Trustees member at the World Economic Forum? And he supports their agenda in Canada. That's why he hasn't gotten rid of the climate change tax, because number one, he doesn't have a majority, so he can't get rid of it. And number two, NDP ain't gonna join him because they love those policies too. So the only way to do it is hide the consumer portion and keep the industrial portion. It says right in the filings with the Supreme Court that that's what the law says, that they can do either or. They don't have to do both. So they're just trying to pull some wool over your eyes. But let's just watch some videos from the World Economic Forum.
Let's take the example of internal combustion engines. In Europe, there's a moratorium from 2030 on new ICE cars. Same thing in the United Kingdom. That tells the auto industry and investors in the auto industry and investors in remote charging and others very clearly where that industry is going. And actually, it tells me where that industry is going, not just in Europe, but where it's ultimately going globally. It might go a little slower elsewhere, but that's where it's going globally. So again, credible forward commitments make a difference. Let's take the example of internal combustion engines. In Europe,
wow. That's Mark Carney a few years back, basically telling us that, we need to get to these electric vehicles. Things are changing. They changed so much that Donald Trump has put back gas-powered vehicles into production. And Canada is pretty much stopping making electric vehicles because of demand, especially because of tariffs.
Let's take the example of internal combustion engines. In Europe,
the UK is in a relatively unique situation in that over the course of the next year, as the negotiations with the EU27 progress, we're going to find a lot more about what the supply capacity of the economy is in the near term, what the right level of the exchange rate should be, whether or not there are going to be tariff or other trade costs, and how all of this affects demand. And of course, it is all of those factors together which determine the appropriate stance of monetary policy. The UK is in a relatively...
So basically, this is from a few years ago when he was in England, the Bank of England, right? And he's talking about tariffs from then. Don't make anybody fool you. Every country uses tariffs.
I think it is true. I'm just remembering this, that more than half of global emissions come from China and the US. Is that correct? I think it is about half.
Yeah, let's say that.
More than half of global emissions come from China and America. Like, come on. Why do we have this carbon tax here in Canada? And all of these foolishness is happening all around the world. Have you noticed that the gas price went down drastically, 20, 30 cents, depending where you are in the country? Why hasn't the food prices come down just as fast. Why? Because the industrial carbon tax is still there
This carbon
as
budget
one of
is
their
very
policies
precious.
from.
On business as usual, so pre-pandemic emissions, we have less than a decade of a carbon budget to remain within 1.5-degree temperature increases. So it is a limited carbon budget. And in that context, really a voluntary carbon offset market does four things. The first, it's complementary, I underscore that, complementary to companies' efforts to reduce absolute emissions. Companies' responsibility, first and foremost, is to reduce their absolute emissions. And as the report says, they need to first reduce, then report, including net zero plans. And I'm sure we'll get into the specifics of that. And then, only then, look to offset. The second thing that this does is it is catalytic. It's catalytic not for renewable projects in many advanced economies where the economics are absolutely clear, they are profitable and they will be driven, but they're catalytic for projects that many of which are in emerging and developing economies where the economics are not yet quite there. And this can help tip the balance for those projects to come in. They also, these offsets can also be catalytic as part of helping the economics of absolutely essential breakthrough technologies that need to happen for us to ultimately get to net zero. This carbon budget is very precious. On business as usual, so pre-pandemic emissions, we have less than a decade of a carbon budget to remain within 1.5-degree temperature increases. So it is a limited carbon budget. And in that context, really a voluntary carbon offset market does four things. The first, it's complementary, I underscore that, complementary to companies' efforts.
So yeah, you know, I don't know if you
When I
caught.
mention now names like Mrs. Merkel, even Vladimir Putin and so on, they all have been young global leaders of the World Economic Forum.
Mm-hmm.
But what we are very proud of now is the young generation, like Prime Minister Trudeau, President of Argentina and so on, that we penetrate the cabinets. So yesterday I was at a reception for Prime Minister Trudeau, and I know that half of this cabinet, or even more half of this cabinet, are actually young global leaders of the World Economic Forum.
They penetrate cabinets? Come on. Justin Trudeau was just the Prime Minister of Canada. He got replaced with Mark Carney. Mark Carney installed the same ministers that Justin Trudeau had. And you just heard it right from the horse's mouth that he's very proud. Like one of them Proud Boys. He's proud that he's infiltrated Canada's government, and more than half of the ministers are young economic foreign ambassadors. Come on. You just saw the agenda.
It depends whether I'm not necessarily going to accept we're in the middle of a battle at the moment. I think we're having constructive discussions around adjustment of policy. It's partly adjustment of policy. It's partly acceptance of responsibilities that already exist.
What's the risk of speculative inflows to Canada, as if the Canadian economy continues to improve, the currency remains strong?
Well, we're not an emerging market. I mean, we have a very deep financial system, we have the most integrated financial system with the United States, we welcome foreign investment. We'll see our fair share of foreign investment, and we'll adjust monetary policy appropriately to achieve that 2% inflation target if we are seeing certain pressures.
Is there a substantial risk in your mind that the Canadian dollar will strengthen further from its current level?
Well, one of the risks to the Canadian economy is persistent strength of the Canadian dollars. We have a competitiveness problem in Canada. We have had a current account swing of 6 percentage points over of GDP over the course of the last 3 years. That's been driven in part by currency, in part by problems in the United States, but also by poor productivity. So we need to get a hold of this competitiveness problem. So yes, it is a risk.
Would a weaker dollar at this point, or how? Let me put it to you this way: to what degree would a weaker dollar, Canadian dollar, help to underpin the Canadian recovery?
Well, cheap money isn't a growth strategy, or cheap currency isn't a longer-term growth strategy or business strategy. Ultimately, what we've got to focus on in Canada is improving productivity, investing in people, investing in infrastructure, and that's going to make the difference. From a central bank perspective, we'll take the level of the currency.
I think out of everything that I've been researching the last few weeks, I think that is the most mind-blowing thing that I found, is that it's so hard to keep your health in order. Our healthcare system is, pressured to the max. You can hardly find a family doctor. You go to the hospital and then they charge you for procedures. And we're supposed to be having free healthcare here in Canada. But when Mark Carney first came to Canada, I don't know if you know, but our dollar was at par with the US. And he was afraid that our dollar would get more expensive than the US. Why? Because he didn't want our dollar to go higher because people wouldn't invest in our country. Let me think about that for a minute. So first we're at $1, and then we had 10 years or so of Mark Carney, and now our dollar is at 30% less. Now, if you have to go to the US and do something with your health, it's going to cost you 30% more. So I don't know exactly why they tanked our dollar to go down so low to spur investment when like almost $500 billion of businesses investment has left Canada and went to the US, and the US dollar was more expensive.
How serious a risk right now are those rising commodity prices, those rising food prices, to the Canadian economy and to the global recovery?
Take from the global recovery first. I think one of the big upside risks, if you will, is that growth momentum in emerging markets goes on for longer and becomes unsustainable. It's unsustainable in some major emerging markets at the moment. There is a need for additional tightening of policy. I'm not going to be drawn on which ones, but it would appear that is the case. And there's a short-term benefit of that for economies like Canada. Higher commodity prices, better terms of trade, better incomes, investment, etc. But if it's an unsustainable pace, ultimately there's going to be an adjustment farther out, and it's extremely important that policy is calibrated appropriately. That means policy that's right for individual countries, not policy that's imported from the United States.
Okay, but that does raise a question. If we have imported inflation in developed economies, does it not complicate, possibly seriously, the exit strategy for monetary stimulus?
Well, it's no. If you have a credible inflation targeting regime, it does not complicate it. And I'll take Canada as an example.
I just have to say, like, we Canadians are on the edge of a cliff, like the buffalo. I really agree with you. I really agree with you on that. And the only alternative out of all the candidates that are out there is Pierre Poilievre.
more.
Let's hear what.
One of the differences between you and your opponent, Mr. Carney, is you've said no to the WEF, whereas he's heavily integrated into that. Why do you have such strong feelings on that, and how does that impact everyday Canadians?
I just think it's an organization that has a very top-down mentality. I don't believe in top-down. I don't believe that there's this sort of group of globe-trotting experts that can tell us how to live our lives, that can, who can tell us which industry should go up and which should go down, what cars we should drive and what words we should speak and how our money should be spent. I really believe in distributed decision-making, personal freedom, letting people live their own lives and chart their own course. The other thing I've found is that, I've been around politics a long time, so I've met a lot of these people who are considered part of the elite, and I talk to them and I ask them questions, and then I go out to my constituency and I talk to truck drivers and mechanics and farmers, and I find the latter group is actually smarter. Now,
It's a good thing I became a truck driver before I became a health professional, because I guess I got a little bit of smarts. But I think he basically put something down on the head. How would you feel that, somebody told you what you had to eat, what you could drive or not drive, where you could live, how much money or no money you should have, where would you have your autonomy? And this is what the World Economic Forum is trying to push through their global ambassador, Mr. Mark Carney. But one thing I want to touch on is that these electric vehicles, they're not really good for your health. They destroy your body, and symptoms don't show up right away. But let me see if I can get these comments off. So yeah, how WEF policies impact your health and your wallet, right? So first, health disruption through frequency in food, insects, protein, lab meat, GMO expansion, all disruptive to the gut hormones of the home energy field. So basically, when you're trying to fool around with people's meat, growing lab meat and GMO, genetically modified foods and insect proteins, they disrupt the gut. The gut has the longest nerve in the body, which is the vagus nerve, right? And the vagus nerve basically is a long thing that goes up here. And if you have issues going on in the gut, you're going to have issues going on here. So it's definitely going to affect your digestive health, your mental health by these policies that they're trying to push, right? Next is biofield suppression and mental health control. Digital ID, AI policing, and cashless economies mean less autonomy, more stress, and natural suppression. So, do you really want to keep on going down this road that they're pushing? Like, let's look at this a little bit, right? Digital ID. You want a microchip inside of you, so when it's time to buy or sell, or you can't buy or sell, you have that ID. Would you like every time that you go to Chat GPT to try to do some research or whatever, that you're not getting fed the whole information, just whatever they want to feed you, right? What else do we got here? It's going to give you less autonomy, more stress, and natural suppression. Why? Because you're not getting the full picture. It's just like me. The work I do with health is to help people get the full picture that they're not getting from their doctors. They're not getting from their blood tests, the CT scans, the MRIs, because it's missing most of the information. Number 3, financial drain, frequency collapse, carbon taxes, energy rationing, more money out and less vitality. I'm pretty sure that we're not healthier with all of these policies that have been in place for years now, and they want to continue it for another 4 years. If you feel that they are, just put it in the chat. Taxes for smart cities or carbon to climate targets make life less affordable. As I said, gas prices came down so much, but at the grocery store, it hasn't even budged because the industrial carbon tax is still in play. And I don't think that's right. And this is the guy that wants to keep it going. If you actually pay attention to his videos on YouTube, the mainstream media, they're gonna push his agenda more than the actual truth. But every time he talks about the World Economic Forum, he does not hum, he does not pause, he speaks the truth because he speaks fluently. Once he starts to come off of the topic and people start to grill him on the truth, that's when you get the hemming and hawing. I mean, I do it a little bit, but I'm new to this. But he's been on this world form, he's the elitist. He's been there for a while. So I think he should be a little bit more polished, being the former Bank of Canada governor in England. And, we could talk more about his foolishness, but right now it's just all about the World Economic Forum. So are you ready to keep on accepting these policies from the World Economic Forum? Are you ready to make change? Hopefully you can share this out with your friends and family, people in your community, because the mainstream media, CTV, CBC, CP24, they're not spreading this out. And just like the debate last night, they basically canceled the media scrum because you know what? They didn't want the narrative to come out that this is an issue, right? So if there's any comments, you can put them into the chat or whatever, and we'll try to get back to you if you have any questions on anything that I basically reported here. And I think we need to be doing our due diligence with our health and our wallet, but we have to actually discern from the truth. Good Friday is a good day to start discerning what's real and what's fake. I don't think Jesus died on the cross for us to basically piss it all away. We're supposed to have dominion on this earth, right? Nothing in the Bible talks about we got to be doing something with climate change, right? It says basically things are going to happen. And when it's time, he'll just come back for us and make the world new. But why should we making moms not have the funds they need to keep their kids healthy with proper food, a place to stay? Why is it that, people are living on the streets more these days? So hopefully this resonates with you. Quantum Boss, I'm signing out. And I wish you to have the most blessed Easter possible. And if possible, go and vote. You can vote liberal if you want, but I'm voting conservative because the conservatives have said that nobody in their party is allowed to be connected with the World Economic Forum. And hopefully they stay true to that. If they don't, I know somebody that will hold them to account. That's Jesus Christ. So I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt, and I'm going to vote for them this time instead of all these